Blog Talk Radio.
Live from Washington, D.C., it's Quintessential Listening, Poetry Online Radio. QLPOR, as it's widely known, features a bevy of poets, spoken word artists, and live poetry readings with best-selling authors. Your host is Dr. Michael Anthony Ingram.
Welcome to the program, everyone. I am Michael Anthony Ingram. It's National Poetry Month, and my special guest is one of my favorite emerging poets. His name is Austin Davis. Hello, Austin.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me, my friend.
I am so glad that you're here to share from your new book, Lotus The Apocalypse. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you. I am so honored to be here, and it's always just such a fun time talking with you, my friend.
All right. Let's begin this journey, okay? This is National Poetry Month, my friend. Why do you believe it's important that we celebrate who we are as poets?
You know, I have always firmly believed in the power of art to not only connect us, but help us heal and grow collectively as a community. And in writing this book and in traveling and meeting people, you know, sharing my work and hearing the work of others, I've found this to be so incredibly true in many different ways. You know, I think that poetry is just such this beautiful tool to share various perspectives, change each other's minds, you know, and show that we're all a little more connected than we might think, even when we're feeling so alone, you know. So I firmly believe in the beautiful power of poetry.
Fantastic. Let's focus for a second on Lotus The Apocalypse. What inspired your new book, my friend?
Yeah, so, you know, during the first year of the pandemic, that's really when I first started writing these poems. It was a very difficult time for me in my mental health. I have OCD and Tourette's and depression. And during the first year of the pandemic, it got really rough for me. I kind of felt like I was climbing this mountain with my mental health. And I knew that if I kept climbing, you know, I'd eventually find a place where I could rest. But I guess I just kind of felt like I got too exhausted with it all. So for a little bit there, I felt like I kind of let go. I felt like I wasn't really taking care of myself. I felt like I was self-medicating and just kind of falling down this path that I didn't want to go on. And then I started writing these poems that were brutally honest, you know, and that was a little different for me because usually in the past when I was writing poetry, it started in this place of honesty, and then I built this story around it. But with these poems, I really just put it all out there. Even when it made me uncomfortable to talk about, I felt like I needed to push through that discomfort. And it helped, you know, it worked, and it helped me, I guess, grab a rock and keep climbing. So I like that. Tell me about the title, Lotus The Apocalypse. It's so striking. Tell me about the title. Thank you. Yeah, so this book is a poetry novella that tells the story of the last day on Earth, as this character Lotus tries to figure out what the point of life is before the end of the day, so before it's too late. And for me, you know, when I was thinking of this character in my head, the lotus flower was such a striking image for me. And I think that, you know, historically, the lotus flower is this symbol for purity. And in my mind, the purest form of purity is being completely honest with yourself and the people around you, the people that you love, you know, about your faults, your fears, your vulnerabilities, so that you can grow and heal, and so that we can grow and heal collectively as well. And that's kind of where the name came from, I guess, and that's kind of where that character arrived.
You know, it's funny. Some years ago, I heard from a person from a Buddhist perspective, and she shared that without mud, there is no lotus. So you've got to go through something. You've got to go through something to have something. Yes, my friend. So without further ado, please share from your new book.
All right. This first poem I'm going to read, I'll read the first poem from the collection. This poem is called The World Will End Tonight, and it's the first poem that I wrote from this book, and it's actually the first poem that I've ever written where I didn't edit it at all. I wrote this poem. Yeah, I wrote this poem after having a panic attack pretty early on in the pandemic because I was living with my girlfriend at the time and my mom and dad who were older than me, and my brother and sister who were pretty young, and we didn't know much about the virus, and I got really sick, and for me, my anxiety, it starts in this place of reality and then it spirals out, and it makes everything feel catastrophic. And it was these weird feelings, of guilt and remorse because, as we talked about, I think a while back, I run this homeless outreach program. So, I was out on the streets every single day during the pandemic, or during the first part too, even when people were quarantining, because I was bringing, those experiencing homelessness, essential items. So I was exposed to a lot of people. And so it was like these weird feelings of guilt and shame of trying to do the right thing for your community, but still ending up hurting those that you love, and those all kind of work together to form this short little poem. This one's called "The World Will End Tonight." The world will end tonight, the weatherman says, when the flower heads twist down at 6:15. Remember that summer of hot breath, open windows, and making love to the sound of bicycles passing by. Kiss me soft as the clouds peel away from the sun like dark yellow apple skins. Let me hold you, run my hands through your hair these last few minutes. Thank you.
Oh, wow. Let me run my hands through your hair these last few minutes. That's a powerful line.
Thank you.
It's a very powerful line.
Yeah, I think that for me, the pandemic and the isolation and loneliness, it added to my mental health issues. But for me, at least, when I'm in a really bad place with my OCD, OCD for me is all about fear. It's all about your brain saying this is something that's really bad, and if you don't do this compulsion, if you don't do this thing, this terrible thing that you're really afraid of is going to happen. And honestly, it feels like the world is ending every time that your brain gets to that place because you physically can't function. So that's really where this book was born out of. It was born out of wanting to survive and keep going, but not knowing how.
Please share another poem.
Yeah. This next poem, this one's called Lotus and Depression. Lotus and Depression. Last night, as I was driving to your apartment, I threw up whatever the hell was in my stomach, all over the steering wheel, and hit a feral cat. I named her Pythagoras and dug her a grave with my car keys next to a patch of purple wildflowers by the highway. It scared me that I drove away and didn't cry. What's the difference between a handful of benzos and you holding my face in your hands and assuring me I'll be okay? Do you ever feel like an amoeba in a drop of water on Mars when I'm struggling to keep my eyes open and you notice how much weight I've lost? I keep thinking I'll step out of this rough patch eventually, but the grass has grown so high I can feel it brush along my lips. You don't like how bony my shoulders are, but we still touch each other sometimes with the lights off. Thank you.
Oh, wow. Wow. One more, Austin, one more poem because it helps me learn more about you, my friend. Share one more.
Definitely. Well, here, this is one of the least sad poems from the book. So I'll read this.
All right.
Yeah. This one's called Lotus and Love. We meet up in the library parking lot every night after you get off work at the drugstore. We lie on the roof of my van and stare up at the sky. You call the stars cosmic freckles and tell me that our biology teacher from high school buys glow-in-the-dark condoms and that the V on the middle of a Valium pill looks like a little heart that wants more than anything to become a circle. I nod and laugh and think about how we're both going to die some night in our sleep and we'll never see it coming. The leaves have no idea they're going to fall. The fish have no idea they're going to be eaten by an unhappy family around a big oak table, and you have no idea that getting to hear about your day for 32 and a half minutes every night is what makes me okay with waking up in the morning. I suppose this is the way living has always been. You think you're happy until you meet that person who makes you notice every ache in your chest. Maybe we should drive my van into the book deposit bin and steal all the books our consciences can carry. Maybe we should make out or make love or make up some story about a little home in the mountains with art on the walls, a pineapple pizza cooking in the oven, and 1979 by the Smashing Pumpkins playing on a ham radio in the kitchen. In my mind, you're pulling into the driveway in the same car you're driving tonight, about to lie with me by the fireplace on a rug of pink and yellow orchids. Tell me all about the last 10 hours of your existence and make me feel like the man who cried into the clouds during a solar eclipse and did not go blind. Thank you.
Wow. You know, for me, as I listen to your work, you write older than you are. How old do you feel, my friend? How old do you feel?
Oh, man.
It's all you had to go through.
Question. Yeah, you know, over the last couple of years, I feel like I've really just kind of had to grow up more so than I wanted to, just because, you know, a lot of the work that I do, you get put in some pretty difficult situations sometimes. You know, like
Yes.
I've seen people die. You know, I reverse overdoses all the time. You know, I've had guns pointed at me. You know, I've had knives to my back. You know, so I've been in all these situations where you really just kind of have to act, and you have to learn to just kind of trust your gut in a lot of situations and try to do what's best for the people you're trying to serve. You know, and I'm 22 years old. And yeah, I don't know exactly the age that I feel, but I feel older than 22. Let's just say that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I understand, and I picked that up. I really, really do. You know, your poetry, to me, based on our time together now and when we first met some time ago, I first heard you, is about emotion. It's about emotion. Here's my question to you. Do you think someone can be called a poet if they don't feel strong emotions?
Yeah, you know, I think that poetry doesn't have a firm definition, at least not for me. You know, I've been teaching a lot of classes at high schools and libraries for kids and teens, and a lot of, you know, about how to use poetry as this tool for your mental health. And from what I've seen, you know, there's a lot of kids and a lot of teens who have all these ideas of what poetry should be, you know, and it's because we were exposed to these really old, dead, white male poets, you know, in school.
Yes.
And a lot of people just don't connect with that nowadays, and that's totally understandable in my opinion. You know, I think that there's a lot of really beautiful poetry being written today by women, people of color, young people that we should, you know, expose kids to in school. But, you know, what I like to tell kids is, you know, you can learn all these tools of how to write poetry, all these various forms, but to me, you know, it really just comes from memory and experience and story. I think that, you know, emotion definitely can play a big part in it, but I think that, you know, that there's a lot of different things that can inspire a poet. For me, it definitely is emotion. It's having these very strong feelings that I need to get out, you know. But I've met people who, you know, don't often express themselves or express these emotions, but when they're, you know, when they have the time to sit and think about a memory or a trauma or something from the past, then it comes back. So I guess kind of to circle back to your question, you know, I think that in my opinion, you know, the best poetry or the poetry that I connect with best, you know, is rooted in a place of emotion. But, you know, I don't like to put any labels or boundaries on people's work. I say just create, you know, make what you want to make, share it. You know, there's something really beautiful about getting these thoughts, these feelings, whatever, out of your head onto something tangible, you know, that you can hold in your hands. You can light it on fire, you know, or you can hand it to someone. You can hand it to someone else, you know, and it's like putting that power back in yourself, back in your life about, you know, whatever you're going through. When oftentimes, you know, life feels so uncertain and it feels like we don't have a lot of control over the way the wave is going to take us, you know. And I feel like poetry for me is trying to, I guess, reclaim a little bit of that control, at least for a moment.
You know, let's continue with this theme of emotions and feelings. And here's what I'm going to ask you. Does it hurt you to write poetry? If not, why not?
No, I mean, for me, when I was writing this book, it was uncomfortable. It didn't hurt, but there were moments, there are parts in this book where I'm pretty honest about things I'm afraid of, or faults about myself, or things that I don't really talk about, but when I was writing this, I was thinking, how am I going to heal myself or help others, feel a little less alone in what they're going through if I'm not honest about this stuff? And with me, this whole book is about, creating this thing where other people who are feeling lonely or going through mental health struggles or whatever might be able to find a little bit of comfort or solace in this. I think that one of the most beautiful things about writing, and something, this is why I fell in love with writing when I was a kid, was it feels like magic. It feels like magic to be able to read something that someone wrote, 300 miles away, 50 years ago or whatever, and feel this hug between time and space, and I guess that's the goal for me. But there's something that was really liberating too. After I wrote this, you push through the discomfort and you get to a place of better understanding about your mind and your life and your place in this world. And I think that that's something that I really learned in writing this book that I didn't fully understand beforehand, that, sometimes when you're feeling these feelings of discomfort or whatever, it doesn't mean you should stop writing. It means, maybe just push through and see what happens when you get to the other side.
Oh, wow. Let's take a brief break and we'll be right back.
Awesome.
Back. I am here with Austin Davis, and he's the son I never knew that I needed. That's how I feel about you, my friend.
Oh, man. Very high praise. Such an honor,
Yes.
It's making me feel all sentimental here in the morning,
Please share another poem.
I definitely will, my friend. I'll read this one. This one is called Lotus and the Meteors. And Lotus and the Apocalypse is broken up into 2 acts. I'm a big music nerd, and I wanted to kind of structure this book like an album. So I split it up into 2 different sides, kind of like a record. So there's an interlude between the 2 parts. And this poem is called Lotus and the Meteors, and it's the first poem in the 2nd act. Meteors are falling, but I don't think meteors are really falling. Fish swim through the sky. White bones, licked clean, drop slow, like clouds that have seen some real shit and have hardened over time. Our home has vanished from the neighborhood. All that's left is a brick patio with lawn chairs, a few cigarette butts beside ashes. There's probably a little moss green house with teddy bear drapes pulled across the windows, posted up on Mars. The TV is still on. The dog is peeing all over the carpet, and I'm sorry, but I left the stove on purpose. Thank you. Yeah, that one's kind of about, those
Well, I was going to ask you, we were from here. I was going to ask you, what is the purpose of that poem?
Yeah, the beginning of it is meteors are falling, but I don't think meteors are really falling. And for me, that's oftentimes how my OCD feels. It feels like something really terrible is happening, like the world is ending. It feels like these meteors are falling, but they're not actually. It's all, your brain trying to convince you that something bad is happening. So that poem is all about OCD for me, but it's also about, those fears and, trying to fight that OCD, but then getting kind of too hard and just kind of self-destructing, So it's about having, this internal catastrophe or whatever with your mental health, doing what you can to try to fight it, and then just saying, I'm leaving the stove on, fuck it,
Yes,
yes.
yes.
It's a shorter poem, but it's a dark one,
Yes. Tell me about the cover of your book in terms of the process for coming up with it.
Oh, yeah. So the artist, his name is Cody Sexton, and he runs a press called Anxiety Press. The book's published by Outcast Press, by the way, which is just such an incredible publisher. They are incredible, and I am so blessed to have worked with them. But Cody, he is incredible as well. Really what happened was we were just kind of chatting. He's friends with Sebastian, who runs Outcast Press, and we all just kind of talking, and I had this idea for this character with a lotus flower as a head tipping back in a chair. And that's kind of all I said. I just kind of wrote these notes, and I was like, I have this vision in my head. I can't really make art. I don't know how to do that. And he was like, oh, man, I got this, And so I sent him my notes, and then he created this just really beautiful piece of artwork, like way more cool, and just it was like taking the image I had in my head and enhancing it and making it something that I didn't even know that I wanted. That's how good it is, So he is such an incredible artist, and the whole team at Outcast is really amazing too. We had Natalie and Paige, they worked with me and Sebastian on this book, and there's just some incredible, formatting in this book. They included these little illustrations throughout the collection, and the font is just great, and I love the way the book came together, because I think that the way a book is put together is also a kind of art. The way that it feels in your hands, and the way that the pages turn, that all adds to the feeling. And there's just something that I love so much about holding a book in your hands and reading it, in the flesh, I guess.
Well, hold that book in your hands right now and share it.
Yeah. All right. I'll read this one. This is the last poem that I wrote in this book. It's not the last in the collection, but it's one of the last. And when I was kind of at my breaking point with my mental health, I got in a pretty bad car accident. And it could have been really, really bad. I was, for a while, I was answering calls in the middle of the night from people experiencing homelessness who were in danger, because oftentimes, those in the streets, you don't want to call the cops because, oftentimes you're going to be criminalized, and if you call an ambulance, if you don't have insurance, you're going to get bankrupt,
Yes.
So I was
so true.
Yeah. So I would leave my phone on all night, and I would answer calls. I would go out, and pick women up if they were being assaulted, or I would break up fights or reverse overdoses or whatever, but it got to the point where it just wasn't sustainable. And I got in a car accident really late at night. And then I wrote this poem about this kind of fear of, oh man, this could have killed me, like that. Looking back on it, like, man, that could have been really, really bad. And I just got really, really lucky, All
right.
It's called Lotus in the Crash. I send the tire from some guy's Jeep spinning into the freeway. Glass rains over my head and burns like snow. I see my breath. He looks like Wes, the dick from high school who stole a pair of handcuffs from his dad's police belt and threw me into the dumpster behind the cafeteria like end-of-the-week meat one night in summer. Tonight, Wes, who isn't Wes, breaks my nose like the airbag should have. He wipes blood from my face and smears it on my lips like makeup. I see flowers between his teeth, flowers in the broken glass sparkling up the freeway, flowers in the flames. The apocalypse is here. Worms fly from a fire hydrant. The tattoos on Wes's neck peel off his skin and launch at me. A trimmer tears the city in half, and a blue station wagon shoots off the bridge. No one seems to notice the clouds falling from the sky. Covered in soot, I break into my parents' house through the window. I crawl into bed between them. Mom flips over on her side. A tree taps at the window, and I think of how my dad used to tell me that during a bad storm, either the branch will break or the wind will stop, and the wind will always stop eventually, so the tree just has to hold together until morning. I look up at the fan and imagine all the stars and planets, the endless silence on the other side of the ceiling. I speak a prayer, and someone says bless you in their sleep. Thank you.
Oh, wow. You know, what I like about your work is that it's so real. I could picture it.
Thank you.
Accessibility.
Yeah, one thing for me is, you know, I've been performing for a really long time, and I really fell in love with the act of performing. And I guess for me, you know, when I'm performing my poems, I want each line, each image to be so striking that, you know, someone listening can hear it, can feel it, can see it, but it leads into the next image in a way that feels cohesive, you know. So I want it to feel, you know, like you're engaged on every syllable. You know, that's kind of the goal for me, and it's actually like really a fun game to try to figure out how to do that, you know. And I kind of feel like oftentimes poetry is, you know, creating the puzzle pieces and then finding a way to put them together in the right way. So it's all this like this really fun puzzle game for me, I guess.
You know, you probably shared on your first visit to my show an early moment where you learned that poetry had power. I'd like you to go back again and share with us just your thoughts on that, an early moment in your life where you first felt that poetry had power.
Oh, yeah. I mean, over and over again throughout my life, many moments. But I think when I was a kid, one of the defining moments was when I started to have, you know, these compulsions. I got diagnosed with OCD, and I started to have these weird intrusive thoughts, you know, and I didn't understand them. And my friends didn't really get it, you know, because it felt weird and different. And I felt awkward and scared to share them with people because I thought, you know, oh, that this is something that's wrong with me. You know, what am I doing? You know, what's wrong? Thankfully, my mom is a psychologist. She's a child psychologist. So I often like to joke that, you know, she's Dr. Mom, you know, so she really taught me a lot of tools growing up, how to, you know, deal with my mental health and use cognitive behavioral therapy, you know, as a positive tool. But when I was a kid, poetry was a really defining moment when I found these new contemporary poets who were writing about fear, and they were writing about OCD and mental health and anxiety. And I felt comforted, I guess. And I felt like I found community, even though I'd never met these people, you know. I was reading these poems and I was like, oh my God, you know, this person gets it, you know, or, oh man, if this woman, this guy, this person, they've been through this, you know, and gotten through and wrote about it, then hell, I can too, you know. And that's really why I started writing, is I wanted to try to use my writing, you know, to help people in the way that writing it helps myself as well. Yeah.
Well, you know, a lot of people, in terms of writing, here's the question. Some poets claim that a poem is like a living creature. Once it's out there, there's not much you can do to correct or improve it, while others edit meticulously, not leaving much from the original draft form. What is your take on it?
You know, it's weird. I kind of just feel it in my gut when a poem is done. And what I usually do is I'll write a first draft, and then I'll wait a couple days, and then I'll read it again. I'll edit if need be. You know, I'll put it away. I'll read it again. And when I can read the poem front to back, you know, over and over again, and each word feels perfect, kind of just in my gut, you know, I'm like, that poem's done. It's done. You know, and there are some poems, you know, that I wrote when I was a kid or when I was younger that I see places where, you know, I went kind of easy on myself, or I could improve on it today, but I don't really concern myself with those poems. You know, the way I kind of think about it is, you know, once the poem's out there, yeah, it is kind of this living, breathing thing, but you know, it's also alive, and I should let that poem have its own life, you know. So I just move on to the next piece, and I kind of just let that poem live its own life, I guess. I think it's funny. I think I was on your show probably when I was in high school, wasn't I? It was
no,
like
I think you started at The University of Arizona. Oh, you University of Arizona or Arizona State? Which one?
Yeah, I go to ASU. Maybe it was my freshman year of college.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it was my freshman year. So I was 18. Yeah. That's crazy. Yeah, because I'm about to graduate now. I'm 22 now. That it feels like a lifetime ago, really. But it's only been a couple of years.
It really does.
Yeah.
For me, anyway, it truly is a lifetime ago.
Yeah. Well, it's just so funny because I'm such a different person now than I was then.
Yes.
I feel like I've grown up in a lot of different ways. Right now I'm sitting in my apartment right now. I just moved into this new place. This is the first time I've lived on my own. It's like a lot of changes, man. A lot of changes, but it's good. It's really good.
Well, let's talk about that. What surprises you most about being a poet?
Let's see. For a while I wouldn't really describe myself as a poet. I was just kind of saying I'm a guy who likes to make things, And I think one of the most surprising things that I've found recently is that I've felt more comfortable trying to create different things. For a while I was just writing poems, but last night, for example, I wrote and recorded a song. It was it was like this spoken word song, and I recorded it, edited it, and I put it on YouTube last night. And I was just. Usually, in the past, if I had made something like that so quickly, I would let it sit, I would edit it, I would plan it out. But I was like, life's too short. I'm just going to make what I want to make when I feel inspired, whatever it may be, whether it's a painting or a poem or a song, and I'm just going to put it out there and take it one day at a time. I'm not a very musically inclined guy, but it was really fun to, try to express yourself in that different way. So the song that I wrote last night, it's just this story about one night and this guy going through kind of a crisis, and I think it kind of pairs well with Lotus and the Apocalypse. So it was fun. It's called Tuesday Night, and it's out on YouTube. So yeah.
How can we find it on YouTube?
I can send you the link if you'd like.
Send me the link, and I'll put it out there. I'll put it in your bio.
If you look up Austin Davis Tuesday Night, you probably find it. So yeah, I can send you the link though.
Here's a strange question for you.
Oh, I give you possibly a strange answer then.
Do poems change color in certain lights?
Oh yeah. I mean, when I read a poem of mine, or even a poem that I like that I've connected with from the past, what's really beautiful for me about these poems is that, I feel like the meaning changes as I change. So there have been poems that I've read 10 years ago or 5 years ago or whatever that I liked on one level, and then I read them now after going through different things and experiencing different things, and I see it in a whole different way. And I think that's really cool. There's these whole worlds to unpack in poems, and I think that's one of my favorite things about it is that, even in such a small container, such a small, box, even the longer poems in my book, for example, are only maybe like 3 pages, I feel like there are these whole worlds to explore. And even if the poem is short, you can read them over and over again and find, new crevices to climb into, new trees to climb. And I think that's really wonderful,
Please share another poem.
Yeah. All right. This poem is called Lotus and Insomnia. I don't remember the last time I slept through the night. I'm so exhausted, my bones feel like soldiers who shot themselves in war and were sent home to their families. When it's late, I walk and do drugs and end up somewhere new. Tonight I'm at a park in a sleepy neighborhood, and I miss my mom, and I hate myself. I puke all over a dead bush. I could wipe it up with the greasy McDonald's napkins in my back pocket, but I don't. The sky is clear, the moon a purple brown. I'm not sure what that means, but if I've learned one thing in this life, anything can feel like a metaphor if you're scared enough.
Wow. Here's a philosophical question.
That was another.
Talk to me.
Right there, yeah.
Oh, beautiful. Here's the philosophical question. Is a poem letting your guard down or building a wall?
I think that for me, it's definitely, letting your guard down from yourself in a way. I feel like I often try to build these walls up around, what I'm really feeling as a coping mechanism, because
yes.
oftentimes there's a lot of bad thoughts, or there's a lot of fear or whatever. And it's a survival tactic, it's a coping mechanism to put these walls up or to not think about it, to distract yourself. Distracting yourself is a big one for me, whether that's with work or school or whatever, But I feel like writing a poem is breaking down that wall and replacing it, with something more comfortable, I guess. It's letting yourself accept that those thoughts, those feelings are there, but also realizing that, you can let it go, you can, acknowledge them as thoughts, but not as reality.
Mm-hmm. As you think about your poetry, my friend, if you were a poet during a different era, where would you want to exist?
Ooh, when would I want to exist? Let's see. I think that the beat movement would be a really cool time to be alive. Just, I don't know,
Tell
just
me
as
more.
a poet. Just as a poet. I don't know. I really like the idea of, just traveling, getting in a van, driving around, performing poems, and that's kind of what I trying to been doing, But I've been interested with that era for a little while. But even farther back, if say I went back to the early 1900s or 1800s, I think just from a historical point of view, it would be really interesting to, kind of just analyze the way people write and create from those times in comparison to today, because without, the advent of the modern technology we have, I feel like creating would be a very different experience, maybe, if you have to only write it on paper, or if you have to have a typewriter, if you need a candle, if you need electricity and you don't have it, I feel like all those barriers maybe could add to the poem in some way. I don't know. I think just as an observer, it would be really interesting. But
all right.
Yeah.
Poetry is about art and craft. And this is what I want to know. How do your poems develop? Please, if you can, guide us through the stages of a poem.
Yeah. Usually I write the heart of the poem first, and I build the body around it. So usually I feel obsessed with an image. I get this image or this line stuck in my head. So for example, the last poem, what I was obsessed with was anything can feel like a metaphor if you're scared enough. Just kind of that line, I wrote that down first. And even though that was the end of the poem, I feel like it's in some way the punchline of the poem or the heart of it. And from there, I just kind of started to pull from my memory, pull from what I was going through that day, and create this little tiny story, to go with it. But yeah, I think I build the heart first and then the body around it. And I think that's kind of the same with how I write a book. I write the heart of the book first, and then, the arms and the legs and the head and all the body, everything comes after, I guess.
Wow. Well, please share from your heart again with another poem.
Thank you. This one's called Lotus and Another Day. At the grocery store, the cashier doesn't ask how my day is going. He stares behind me at the long glass window and bags my beer. I don't ask how he's doing either. This morning, my little sister brought a photo of our family at the beach to her class for show and tell. Dad is mid-sneeze. My sister is shaking sand from her hair. My brother and I stand on our tiptoes, fighting over who's taller. Mom smiles. In class, the kids pass the pictures around in a circle, holding them close to their little faces, smudging us with their fingers. I'm sorry I keep changing the subject. The sky is falling more and more each day, and I'm afraid of what will happen when I reach to touch the clouds and only grab air. Thank you.
Wow. Just want to let that settle for a minute.
Yeah.
I need to take it in. Please share another.
Definitely. This one's called Lotus and Fear. And it's one of the older poems from this book. And it originally started as as a poem called Happy Birthday. And then I added it to the book and edited it and kind of fit it to fit this story. So this one's called Lotus in Fear. There's a yellow balloon, the color of autumn after snow, bouncing around my chest. I often mistake its rhythm for my heartbeat, so trust me, I know I can't be trusted. Let's play a party game where we have to take turns telling each other about all our fears and mistakes and take a shot each time we wish we had a time machine. We'll be blackout drunk before the guests start ringing our doorbell. Last night, I broke into my old elementary school and left a coffee mug full of wet dirt and seeds in the janitor's closet to see if it's possible for a flower to grow tall and bright under the glow of a light bulb on a string. I've always thought of happiness as being tangible, the most brilliant mango hanging from the highest branch. But if we can't even find the forest, how are we supposed to climb the tree? Each day numbs me into dismissiveness until my lips are purple from wine and I'm sitting on the patio watching the rain darken the red brick tiles around my feet. Fill my lungs with hot breath and we'll blow out the candles together. Sing that familiar tune. Learn how to pop without a sound. Thank you.
Let's take a brief break and we'll be right back. We are back. I am Michael Anthony Ingram, and I'm here with one of my favorite poets, Austin Davis.
Hello, hello.
You work with populations that many people shun. They don't want to think about them, that they don't exist. They're invisible. You're finding the visible in the invisible. Now, what I want to know from you, as you think about poetry, how privileged is poetry? Do you think it's available to the masses or is only for a chosen few?
You know, I think that creating art in general, is a privilege. Oftentimes, taking the homeless population, for example, when you're struggling to survive day to day, when you got to figure out what food you're going to have, when you got to figure out water, when it's 115 degrees outside here in Arizona and you got to figure out how not to die on a sidewalk, even if you want to create something, you don't have the time often, So one big part of our project is we provide people with art supplies and musical instruments. And, every week we have a weekly event for the homeless where we serve a 5-course meal, provide people with smartphones, harm reduction items like clean needles, clothing, shoes, musical instruments, art supplies, all these various resources. We aim to provide this safe space where people can come, have their needs met for a little bit, take a breath, and just relax and be with people who care about them and love them, So oftentimes, the feed is today, actually. It's in 4 hours, So oftentimes at these feeds, after people eat, I see people, painting or writing a poem or playing, a song that they're making on a guitar. We're actually bringing a friend of mine named Big Man. That's his name. He's a really cool drummer and guitarist, and we got him a guitar. So bringing that to him today, he's going to be really happy. But yeah, I mean, I think that it's a privilege for me to be able to have the time, in the space to be able to create, and that's one of our goals with our project too, is to help people, express themselves in that way. But at the heart of it, my goal on the streets, it's a movement of love, and it's about showing, those experiencing homelessness that, they are loved, they have a friend and they have people on their side who care about them, because I firmly believe that loneliness is the silent killer for people experiencing homelessness. And I've had many people tell me that they didn't kill themselves because they knew they had a friend, or they had something to look forward to, or they knew that they had someone who cared about them, and
Yes.
along with all the, the services we provide, the resources, at the heart of it, I think that is one of the most important things you can provide another person. And I tell people, all the time, in your day-to-day life, even if you don't have any money to give, any resources, any water, saying hi to someone on the streets or giving them a smile or just not being, mean is really important. Oftentimes people tell me that flying a sign, on the side of the street is a full-time job because people will pull up and laugh at people. They'll laugh at you, or they'll throw pennies at you, or they'll record you, or they'll look away from you with disgust, or, if they see on the sidewalk, they'll walk around you or go the other way, and it's dehumanizing, it's degrading, and that's one of our goals of the project, is to just try to, not only break down those stigmas, but, show people that they're loved. So, with my last project before Lotus, I made a jazz poetry album. I don't know if I told you about that.
No, you didn't.
I did, yeah.
No.
So
No.
it's called Street Sorrows, and I made it with my friend Joe Alley. He's a really cool musician. It's 3 songs, and each song is about a specific person and experience on the streets. And the goal with that project was to try to, break down these stigmas around homelessness. Because people were asking me, people were saying poetry, feels like this act of love. Can you write me a poem? So I was writing these poems about people, and also as a way to, kind of cope and, move through and process, these experiences I was having out there. And it kind of just turned into this little jazz poetry album. And that was a really cool experience making it.
It's funny. A couple of years ago, I developed a program for the homeless population or unhoused population, and it was titled Finding the Visible in the Invisible. And what we focused on was primarily revisiting the 5 senses, because sometimes when you live a life that sometimes you don't feel is worth living, you forget that you have all these wonderful senses to help you process the world.
Yeah.
And that was very powerful. I learned a lot. I really learned a lot. I really, really did.
That's wonderful.
So when you think about your writing, what do you hope readers get from encountering your work?
I hope that someone reads it and, maybe feels a little bit of hope that whatever they're going through, will pass. Or I hope someone will read it and say, oh, man, I don't know exactly what this guy's going through, and he doesn't know exactly what I'm going through, but we can find, a moment of peace and understanding in this space. That's kind of the goal with me for poetry, for whatever I'm creating, because life is as hard as it is, and I think that, we should all try to look out for each other in whatever ways we can, whether it's holding the door for someone at the grocery store, or saying hi to someone at the gas station, or, calling someone you love at night and checking on them, or whatever it is, it's those little things that make people feel loved and seen and heard. And I guess overall the goal for me is to create connection through catharsis with poetry.
Oh, wow. Catharsis. Wow.
Yeah. Connection through catharsis.
Oh, I like that. I'm going to steal that one. I like that. I like that.
It's all yours, my friend. It's all yours.
Okay, I probably will steal it.
Hey.
You.
Yep.
Okay. The world has changed so much, my friend, in terms of technology.
Yep.
I shared with my dad that I host a podcast on the computer, and he said, a podcast? What is that?
Right.
And I said, it's beamed out through the internet. The internet, he's 83 years old. The internet, I was like, yes. It was funny. So to you, my friend, here you are, a young buck, and we first reconnected on Twitter. This is my question. Do the internet and social media contribute to the well-being of poetry?
That's a really interesting question, because I think that, if you're talking on the broader scale, I think that the internet in many ways, is detrimental to our collective mental health, I think. But at the same time, I think so, especially for young people. I know for myself, it's very easy to get addicted, to social media and to the internet, but it's also this really incredible, beautiful tool for sharing knowledge and, sharing your perspective and learning. It's really a beautiful thing that we can go onto YouTube right now and learn pretty much whatever we want to learn about history, math, science, literature. That's incredible. And I think it's also this really amazing space for art and poetry and music to flourish, because you can create something and share it with the world. And that in itself is that's another type of magic, I think, but I think that there's downfalls to it as well. And for me, I think it's about navigating that, because there's a certain power that comes with, the internet. And I think that learning, to use it as a tool and as a space for connecting and love, and also, actively working to live in the moment and be with those that you love, be in the present. All that is just things that I guess I had to kind of work on and learn as I grew up, So I think that it definitely is a beautiful tool, but that nothing is 100% good or bad. I think,
Yes.
In this scenario, I think that it's, there are gray areas, and everything's complicated. My motto, over the last couple of years, is everything happens all the time. And I think I stole that from somewhere. I don't know where, but it's just
there's a lot of stealing going on around here.
I know, but it's comforting in a way. It's not exactly a happy motto. Everything happens all the time, but it's nice in a way to realize that, okay, yeah, there's a lot going on, and I might not understand it all, and sometimes it feels overwhelming, but I'm keeping going, and I'm taking it one thing at a time, one day at a time, and it's all going to be all right.
Well, I'd like you to share another poem.
Find another one. I will read. I'll read the last poem from the book. There are a few poems in this book, located in different sections that are told in the third person instead of the first person. And this is the last poem, and it's told in the third person, and it's called Lotus and Loss. If you point your telescope up on this clear summer night, you might be able to spot Lotus. He's probably too small to see from your backyard, but hey, you could tell your kids that any one of those airplanes could be him falling back to Earth. Right about now, Lotus is swimming through nothingness like he has been for longer than he knows. Back in the rocket on Mars, Captain is smoking his fourth cigarette and banging his fist against the table over and over again. The crew is shuffling away to the edge of the little kitchen as their coffee mugs bounce up and down. On Earth, mission control is in a code red. Every telescope from New York to LA is focused on finding their stick of hay in a pile of needles. Unfortunately for NASA, a little college newspaper caught word about Lotus. Within an hour, every news station in the country was talking about this poor boy from Prairie Creek on their evening broadcast. Every kid with a pair of binoculars is straining out their window right about now, scanning the sky until bedtime. When you're hurtling through space, slower than Mrs. Huckles rides her electric scooter to the supermarket, you have a lot to think about. For a while, Lotus screamed. He screamed and screamed, flailing about for God knows how long. Lotus thought of his mother giving him a hug on Thanksgiving, drinking beer with his friends on the roof, the children and wife he never met. Lotus cried. He cried so long, the blackness began to look like a cape. He thought he might be able to grab in his hands and pull away to unveil autumn in his little town where everything would be okay again. Lotus thought about movie theaters, wind chimes, school buses, and making love. He thought about being a kid and spending his summers trying to touch the bottom of Wilson's Lake, but never having enough breath. He thought about biting into a peach, falling off a bike, being so tired you pass out on the couch with the TV still on, and how bodies don't decompose in space. Lotus will be 21 years, 4 months, and 18 days old until the sun explodes. He couldn't wipe his eyes in his spacesuit and helmet, so the tears dried on his cheeks. Maybe Lotus will be found by a time-traveling orangutan or a teenage alien who ran away from their planet in the angstiest possible way. Or maybe he wouldn't be found. Maybe that would be just as well. Lotus closed his eyes and saw nothing but the color of wind. Thank you.
Wow. You've written 2 books, right? Am I correct?
Yeah. I wrote a couple books, they were published when I was in high school and early on, but the last 2 ones, The World Isn't the Size of Our Neighborhood Anymore, and
yes,
Lotus,
I remember
felt
that
like those were my the first kind of cohesive books, where I had an idea for a book, a collection, a story, and I wrote it, But before that, in my senior year of high school, I wrote a book called Cloudy Days, Still Nights that was published by Moran Press, which is an amazing publisher. Stephen Moran is such a cool guy. And it wasn't really cohesive. It was really just kind of my first, chance, my first idea, of like making a book. So it was just kind of a lot of poems about being a high school student in love. That's kind of what it was. But yeah, this is I think the best thing I've made, and I'm proud of it, and I'm hoping that some people can find a space to heal, or a space to feel comforted in it,
You shared with me prior to the show that you travel the country in terms of presenting your work on stage. How important is it to you to take part in poetry readings and other live events? And the second part of this question, do you share your poems with anyone before you decide that they're completely finished?
Yeah, well, for me, touring and performing, is such a fun thing, and it's also just so important, I think, to poetry. It's really beautiful and really important to, share the art of poetry, in your words and your experiences with as many people as possible, I think, and I've had such a fun time. I've toured around Arizona, and then I went to the Midwest. That's where all my family lives in Indiana. So I went to Cleveland first and had one of the best shows I've ever had, packed show with some really great friends, and just, it was really great. And people came up to me after the show, and various shows throughout the tour, and they were saying, that this is what I'm going through, and you saying what you're going through has helped me, feel, comfortable talking to you about it. And it was like these little therapy sessions after and during each show. And that was just really eye-opening for me. But yeah, then I went to Indiana, and I stayed on my granddad's farm, and I got to see all my family. And I just got back from I just got back from New Jersey, and it's been really fun, just traveling around. And I do share my poems with some of my friends sometimes. Sometimes I'll write a poem and just like post it on Instagram or Twitter, that night, just because I just kind of had the feeling for it. I was like, this poem is not one that I'm going to work on later. It's just something I want to get out there. But I kind of just, listen to my body and my gut, with a poem. And if it's something that I want to sit with, I won't share it for a little bit, but sometimes I'll share it with my close friends or my parents, or, whoever wants to read it, really. I'm not very secretive with my work. I kind of just like to share it with whoever wants to read it,
All right. We've reached the end of our journey, my friend.
Thank you.
I've got
so
a
much
couple
for
more
having
things
me
I'd
today.
like to ask you.
Definitely.
Wait, I'm not through yet. Hold on. I know we're not done. What I want to know is, where can listeners find your work?
Yeah. So Lotus the Apocalypse, it's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. So if you look up Lotus the Apocalypse on Google, you'll find a link. It's on Amazon as well, and some local bookstores throughout the country. I've been leaving books in random places during my tour. So I left books on like park benches and in restaurants, and I gave books to Uber drivers and, in seatbacks on planes. So if anyone finds those books,
just
for the heck of it, just for fun. But my Instagram is at Austin W. Davis 1. Twitter is Austin_Davis17. So yeah, if anyone reads the book and they like it, reach out, let me know. And
Well, finally, what is in the works for you next? I know graduation is in the works,
Yeah, next week is finals week for me. So I got to get through. Yeah, I got to get through finals, and then I graduate college, which is kind of crazy. This summers are really, really busy, because it's all kind of focused on heat relief for me. It's just helping people survive. So we're launching a heat relief campaign here with AZ Hugs is the nonprofit's name, the project. So I'm going to keep running this homeless outreach program. I'm going to keep writing. I got a new book that I started writing. It really early works, so not for the next couple of years, but something I've just been kind of tinkering with. But I'm going to keep doing outreach and keep, writing, and I don't know where the journey is going to take me, but just keep following my passions and, trying to spread love in whatever ways I can.
Well, I want to thank you, Austin, for being with me today. I've hosted over 200 shows, and sometimes I grow weary in terms of just thinking, I'm tired.
Yeah.
But talking with people like you, hearing your work, gives me the energy to continue doing what I'm doing. And I want to thank you for that. For revitalizing me.
Seriously, that is, that really means the world to me. Seriously, I told you, you're making me feel all sentimentally. I'm sending you a virtual hug. A virtual hug.
I know it. I need one too.
Yeah. I know. We've all been going through it. We've all been going through it.
Yes, we have.
Virtual hug to you. Virtual hug to anyone listening. It's all going to be okay.
It's going to be okay. I want to thank you. I commend you. Like I said again, to me, you're a superstar in the making, and I wish you nothing but the best. I know that you're going to be out there doing the work that needs to be done.
Yes,
and you're going to be spreading the word through the power of poetry, and that is so important, man, because you reach people differently when you emote, when you share your soul. Yeah. And, again, you're my friend, and I wish you a happy graduation.
Thank you. I wish you, a happy spring, a happy trip back home, and I just appreciate you so much, and I'm really glad, that we've built this relationship over the years, and I just feel really grateful.
Yes.
So thank you.
Yes.
Thank you again.
Well,
I will
to our
talk
listening
to you
audience,
soon, my friend. All right. Yes, sir.
All right. I know you got to get going. Go ahead. To my listening audience, I want to say thank you again for tuning in. And as I share with you every time we're on the air, that poetry rings somewhere throughout the land. Take care, everybody. Until next time, I'm Michael Anthony Ingram. Goodbye.
Quintessential Listening, Poetry Online Radio, is available on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, and Stitcher. You can also check out the website at qlpor.com.